He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just said it, low, hollow, like it hurt to speak. I shouldn't have opened it. The USB glinted in his hand, tiny and cold, like it knew what it carried. His fingers trembled, but not from fear. It was something deeper. A kind of recognition. He didn't look at the camera. He didn't need to. The room was still, suffocatingly so. One light flickered above him. A ticking wall clock pressed against the silence. When the voice behind the camera finally asked, "Is it real?" his eyes closed. His chin dropped. He nodded once. Nothing dramatic. No theatrics. Just the quiet shatter of a man who could no longer pretend he hadn't seen what he saw. No one in the room moved. The world narrowed to breath, metal, and memory. Somewhere, a computer whirred back to life. Somewhere, something buried was beginning to surface. 2 minutes. That's how long the USB had been inside the machine. 2 minutes of nothing. Just a monitor glowing blue, and him frozen like a statue. Then, finally, the words appeared. Drive recognized. No folder names. No files visible. Just the computer, acknowledging something foreign was inside it. He didn't breathe. His hand hovered above the mouse but didn't move. Outside, the city was asleep. A siren somewhere in the distance, faint and indifferent. The room was heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. The cursor blinked, each pulse like a heartbeat. Nothing invited him to open the contents. There was no label. No encryption. No description. It felt deliberate, like someone wanted him to feel uncertain, to fear the click more than what came after. And still, he clicked. The folder opened without a password. No security, no firewalls. Like whoever put it there wanted it seen. One file. Footage on AVE. No thumbnail. No metadata. Just a name that sat in the center of the screen like a threat. His mouth went dry. The mouse moved. He didn't remember moving it. Another click. The screen flickered. Then black. A pause. Then the audio began. At first, just static. Then, voices, distant, afraid, overlapping. The kind of crowd noise that wasn't a celebration but aftermath. A scream. Then silence. The screen lit up, a shaky handheld shot of a dirt road. Then, a face. A child. Maybe 9 years old. She stared at the lens as if she knew exactly who'd be watching years later. Not scared. Not confused. Just knowing. And then the camera shook violently. Something, someone, screamed behind the lens. Then black. The image steadied. A little girl stood alone on a dirt path. Her dress was torn, pale yellow. Her hair clung to her face. Behind her, trees smoldered and the ground was scorched. She didn't move, didn't cry. She just looked into the camera, straight into it, as though it owed her something. Around her, silence fell like a curtain. You didn't need to see the bodies. You could feel them. The air was wrong. The soil seemed burned, not just by fire, but by intention. She raised a hand slightly, like she was about to speak, then lowered it. The camera zoomed, as if the operator had forgotten what they were doing. Then it jerked down. The final frame caught one thing, carved into the bark of a tree behind her, buried. Then black. He yanked the USB from the port. The screen died. The light in the room felt suddenly too bright. He couldn't sit anymore. He stumbled backward, knocking the chair over. His breathing was sharp, erratic, but not panicked. It was shame. Deep, echoing shame. He hadn't just watched something forbidden. He had disturbed something sacred. That footage wasn't a warning or a record. It was a burial site. And he'd walked right over it with a double click. He stared at the USB in his palm. It looked harmless again. But it had weight now. Real weight. Like it carried every scream it ever recorded. 250,000. That's what he paid. But he didn't feel like the buyer. He felt like the body. And this was only the beginning. He never gave his real name. Not to the seller. Not to the bank. Not even to the courier. He moved like a man who had no place in the world, just transit points. Wire transfers, burner emails, locked postboxes. When the USB finally arrived, there was no ceremony. Just a man opening a small brown envelope with shaking hands. But now, in the reflection of the dead monitor, we finally see him. Not clearly. Not fully. Just enough. Mid-40s, South Asian, eyes hollowed by something older than exhaustion. His suit doesn't fit quite right, too loose like it belonged to someone else. He hasn't spoken in hours. His jaw clenches every few seconds, involuntary. This is not curiosity on his face. It's grief. And something deeper. A familiarity with death, not as tragedy, but as routine. He didn't find this USB by chance. He went looking. The seller never met him in person. The USB was shipped from a no-name address in Belgrade. The email that confirmed the transaction was written in fractured English, but it carried no emotion. Just numbers, an account and a warning. Do not share. It is not for the world. There was no backstory. No authentication. But the seller had known exactly what to say, not facts, but feelings. You are not looking for proof, the message had said. You are looking for permission. He'd stared at that line for over an hour. He never replied. But he sent the money the next morning. Not because he believed the seller, but because a part of him feared the seller was right. Some truths are unbearable until someone else carries them first. They told him she went missing, that she wandered off during the evacuation, that the chaos made her untraceable. It happens, they said. Children panic. They hide. Some never come back. He nodded, even as the bile rose in his throat. Because she wouldn't have wandered. She would have held tight. She would have screamed. But there were no screams. No searches. Just a quiet filing away of her name. As though she had never existed. That was 6 years ago. He never stopped looking. Not for her. For them. The ones who watched. The ones who filmed. He believed one thing. Someone had seen. And if one person had seen, then maybe, just maybe, he could make the world see too. He had requested the records 3 times. Each time, the agency mailed a redacted file. 1 page. Black bars across nearly everything. It didn't say where she was last seen. It didn't say who filed the report. It didn't even confirm she existed. There were no fingerprints. No ID photos. Just a line at the top. Subject: minor female. Status: unverified. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Bureaucracy wasn't the villain, erasure was. A system built to unremember. To unname. To unchild. He held the page to the light, looking for invisible ink. For bloodstains. For truth. And nothing. Nothing. The paper was clean. That's what terrified him the most. There was only one photo he kept of her. Laminated, creased, worn like a relic. She was smiling, missing her front tooth, one pigtail falling loose. The background was a simple street corner. Nothing extraordinary. But he memorized every detail. The way her left eyebrow arched slightly higher. The mole on her neck. The way she stood, feet turned slightly inward like she was bracing against the world. It was the photo he carried through checkpoints, embassies, funerals. The one he showed to guards who never looked long enough. Now, with the footage burned into his memory, he pulled it from his wallet again. Compared the eyes. The frame of the face. The mouth, slightly open. And for the first time in 6 years, he allowed the truth to land. The girl in the footage looked exactly like her. He copied the file to a separate drive, not out of caution, but instinct. Then he opened the metadata. The timestamps didn't make sense. The video was dated 2 years after her disappearance. The file name had been changed 3 times, and under the field marked author, there was no name, just a number, 137-6. He stared at it, trying to make it mean something. Military? Refugee ID? Camp code? The formatting matched nothing. But one thing did match, the camera signature embedded in the file. A rare make, issued only to embedded contractors in a single region, northern Sumeria. And she had disappeared in the south. He zoomed into a still of the footage, pausing on her face. The mole on her neck. The crooked smile. His breath stopped. If this was taken years later, then someone knew where she was. Which meant someone let her go missing, on purpose. He made a single call. Not to a friend. Not to family. To a translator who owed him nothing but remembered his name. They met once, years ago during an interview with a camp administrator. The translator had whispered a warning that day. Some lists don't make it to the registry. Now, she answered in a tired voice, hesitant. He told her the file name. Told her the number, 137-6. There was silence. Then she said, "That's not an author ID. That's a transport code." His heart stopped. She continued, "It's how they logged the trucks. Children went in. Cameras went with them. Not all of them came back." He tried to ask more, but she hung up. The line went dead. Outside his window a car alarm wailed, not nearby, but just close enough to rattle. Someone else had heard this conversation. Or maybe, someone had been listening the entire time. He tried to report it. Not to the police, he knew better. He uploaded a clipped portion of the footage to an encrypted drop site. Posted the metadata on 3 dark web forums. The responses came fast. At first, disbelief. Then denial. Then something colder. Silence. The post was removed in under an hour. The second platform banned his IP. The third simply went offline. He wasn't being ignored. He was being buried. He stared at his screen, watching everything vanish, file by file. The internet didn't erase things this fast unless someone told it to. He closed the laptop and pulled the curtains shut. The apartment felt smaller, tighter, like it was collapsing inward. And maybe it was. Maybe that USB didn't just carry footage. Maybe it carried infection. Something viral. Something designed not to reveal a secret, but to destroy anyone who tried. In a shoebox beneath a loose floorboard, he found her old drawings. Stick figures, suns, a tree with names carved into it. One drawing stopped him. A triangle with wheels, a truck. Inside, 4 figures. One had a red X across its face. Another wore a camera around its neck. In shaky writing at the bottom, one word was scrawled. Rufta. He hadn't heard that name in years. It wasn't a person, it was a place. A camp that was burned down during the 3rd relocation sweep. Officially, no children had survived. But this drawing had been made weeks before she vanished. He traced the name with his finger. The pencil marks smudged but intact. She had been trying to tell him something. Before she was taken. Before she was erased. She had left a map. No one saw it, not even him. Until now. The email had no subject line. No sender. Just a single attachment, a still frame from the video he uploaded. The child's face, paused at the moment she stared into the lens. Below the image, 3 words. "She's not yours." He dropped the phone. This wasn't a warning. It was a challenge. Someone else had the footage. Maybe they always did. Maybe they were waiting for someone stupid enough to go public. And now he had. His hands trembled. The message wasn't from a stranger. It was from someone who knew what he'd lost. And chose to say it anyway. Outside, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Not rushing. Not hesitant. Just steady. Like someone who had time. Like someone who was already expected. He found the old camp files through a back door, a forgotten archive buried behind layers of military jargon and bad translations. Rufta Camp. Officially decommissioned. Cleared of all civilians. 0 occupants at closure. But the inventory records told a different story. Bedding for 126 miners. Food rations logged daily. Psychological assessments for children, dated weeks past the supposed evacuation. He scrolled faster. Names were redacted. But one photo remained. A group of children facing away from the camera. One girl had her foot turned slightly inward. He knew that posture. Knew it like breath. The report's author. 137-6 Ardorsh. The same tag from the video. Rufta hadn't been empty. It had been hidden. She called him back. No greeting. Just, don't mention Rufta again. Her voice was panicked now, stripped of its earlier distance. He asked, why? Her answer came fast. Because it was never a refugee camp. His pulse stopped. She continued. It was a holding site. No one was registered there. No oversight. Contractors ran everything. Security, food, even cameras. His throat dried. Who were they holding? He asked. The line crackled. Children, orphans, or anyone who couldn't prove their family still lived. Her voice dropped. They said it was for protection. But it was just removal. He barely got the next words out. Was she there? A long pause. Then, if she made it that far, they didn't lose her. They used her. It arrived in the mail the next day. No return address. No note. Just a sealed envelope containing a single item. An ID badge. A laminate, cracked and faded, with a photo of a man in military-adjacent gear. The name, Amir Faisal, and the tag beneath it, 137, Sexudaryar. He stared at the photo. Something about the eyes felt familiar. Not the man's, his own. He ran to the bathroom mirror, held the badge beside his reflection. His hands began to shake. The cheekbones, the curve of the jaw, the hairline. He'd seen this man before, in a photo with his brother. An uncle, he was told, died in a border skirmish. But that was a lie. Amir hadn't died. He had vanished. And now his tag was tied to the footage. Tied to the girl. Tied to Rufta. This wasn't about one child. It was about blood. His own. No. The USB hadn't been left behind. It had been sent to him. Deliberately. Not as proof. As punishment. Well, a message. And now it was clear who had sent it. Amir. The uncle who disappeared. The operator who filmed the camps. The man who looked into the eyes of that girl and saw his niece. She hadn't wandered off. She hadn't panicked. She had been taken. And someone in his own bloodline had handed her over. He collapsed into the chair, breath shallow. The camera hadn't just documented her. It had followed her, watched her, tracked her. Every frame had been composed by someone who once sat across from him at family dinners. And now he understood why the girl in the video didn't scream. She had recognized the lens. For 6 years he had blamed systems, governments, guards, algorithms that misfiled her case. But all along, the lie had been crafted by someone who knew her laugh, who knew her name. Amir hadn't sold the footage for profit. He sent it like a suicide note. Not to be understood. To be witnessed. Because truth doesn't always heal. Sometimes it breaks clean. And when it does, the shards cut the ones who were never meant to bleed. He had begged for the truth. Demanded it. Hunted it. But now that he had it, he finally understood why no one else wanted it. The truth doesn't set you free. It cages you. Inside a reality where silence wasn't a failure. It was mercy. He sent one message. Just a name, no subject line. Amir. He didn't expect a reply. But within minutes it came. A link, Unwall. Untraceable. No password. No warning. Just a video feed. He clicked. It wasn't archived footage this time. It was live. A dimly lit room. A man sat alone, eyes hollow. Older now. Beard overgrown. Wrists bruised. No words. Just silence between blood. The camera adjusted slightly, as if to say, "This is your truth. Do you want it?" And he did. He leaned forward, voice shaking. "Why her?" Amir didn't flinch. Didn't cry. Just said, "Because she wasn't supposed to exist." That was the answer. No politics. No doctrine. Just erasure, made personal. The war hadn't killed her. The war had catalogued her. Filed her. Processed her. And family had signed the form. There was a moment, unspoken, unwritten, where both men sat in silence. Amir on the screen. Him in the chair. 2 decades of distance. A lifetime of shame. No one raised their voice. No one justified what had been done. The man finally whispered, "She knew you." Amir blinked. That was all. But it landed like an admission. The video stuttered. Static hissed briefly. Then Amir leaned closer to the lens, as if trying to see more than the screen would allow. "She remembered my name," he said. His voice cracked. "Even after everything." The man stood, pushing back from the desk. Not from anger. From nausea. There were no villains in that frame. Just 2 men who had made peace with their own participation. One by doing, the other by looking away. Both were guilty. Just in different frames. He didn't scream. But everything inside him did. The walls heard it. The window panes shook from the silence. He tried to break something, grabbed a glass, threw it against the far wall. But even the shatter felt staged, too clean. Nothing could match the chaos inside his chest. He hit the floor, palms pressed to his eyes, trying to push out the image of her face, that soft, unblinking stare from the footage. She hadn't screamed either. That was the worst part. No rage. No pleading. Just quiet, as though she knew screaming wouldn't matter. That it hadn't mattered for anyone. A child should never have to carry that. But she had. And now so did he. Not because he chose to. Because he finally refused to look away. He replayed the video. Not because he needed to. Because he couldn't stop. He paused on a frame. The one just before the camera dropped. Her eyes slightly turned. Her lips moving. No audio in that second. But he could read it. A single word. Baba. Not shouted. Not mouthed with fear. Just said. Like she expected him to be there. Like she didn't understand why he wasn't. That word, it didn't blame him. It invited him. And that's what shattered him. She hadn't asked for rescue. She had looked for recognition. For presence. That one syllable, spoken by a child in the absence of safety, carried more weight than all the reports, all the files, all the guilt. She remembered him. And he had forgotten how to remember her. He deleted the file. Not out of fear. But reverence. The footage had done its job. It had burned its way into him. This wasn't something to be shared. Or exposed. It was never meant for the world. It was meant for one man to carry, and to finally break beneath. As the bar filled, confirming deletion, he watched his reflection fade with the image. That girl, that moment, that unspeakable stillness, gone from the machine. But not from him. Never from him. The truth hadn't set him free. It had ended who he was. Not with revenge. Not with justice. But with knowing. He whispered it to no one. "I was supposed to protect you." Then sat down in silence. Not as a witness. But as a grave. He sent one final message. Not to a whistleblower site. Not to a journalist. To a human rights tribunal that hadn't returned his calls in 4 years. Attached was a written affidavit. No footage. No names. Just a sequence of events, dated and time-stamped, corroborated by everything but emotion. There was no plea in the words. No anger. Just facts. Cold, quiet, unassailable. A report with no signature. When he hit send, the screen gave no confirmation. Just a spinning wheel. It wasn't about being heard anymore. It was about telling it right, even if no one listened. He had learned this. Silence is not the absence of truth. It is the cost of saying it. And he had already paid more than most. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. Printed. Unofficial. No return address. The header simply read, "Acknowledged." Below, a single paragraph thanking the sender for their submission. At this time it read, "We are unable to verify the material provided." Standard language. Empty. But at the bottom, handwritten in blue ink, were 5 words. "We believed you. Stay quiet." He read it twice, then burned it. Not because he feared it. Because it proved the truth lived somewhere else now, in a room he'd never enter, among people who would never speak. Justice had read the report. It simply decided to survive it, rather than serve it. He went back to the wall. The one where families posted photos of the lost. Thousands of faces, faded with rain and time. Some had flowers. Some had candles. Most had nothing. He found her photo, still there. Untouched. Like the world had forgotten to take it down. He didn't replace it. Didn't touch it. Just stood in front of it, hands in his pockets, and whispered, "I saw you." That was enough. No vigil. No speech. Just presence. The wall wasn't a shrine. It was a ledger. And her face would remain, not because she was still missing, but because the world still refused to see what happened to her. And maybe it always would. Some nights he spoke to her. Not out loud. Just in his head. Small things. How cold the rain was. How quiet the streets had become. How he never stopped thinking about the way she turned her feet inward. He never asked her for forgiveness. He knew better. Forgiveness was for the innocent. He hadn't harmed her. But he hadn't saved her either. And some silences have no repair. So he spoke only to keep the space from vanishing. Because memory, he realized, is not about what we recall. It's about what we keep alive. And if she was gone, he would keep her alive. Not through justice, not through vengeance, but through remembrance. Even if no one else joined him. Peace didn't come like a sunrise. It came like an empty room. Silent, bare, still standing. He no longer checked the door twice. No longer slept with the lights on. But that wasn't healing. It was exhaustion. There's a point where grief becomes routine. Where horror becomes memory. Where you don't scream anymore. Not because you've accepted it, but because you've burned through every sound you had. He lived quietly now. Paid bills. Bought groceries. Answered no calls. And every so often he'd pass a mirror and wonder if she would recognize him. The man who failed her. The man who found her. The man who told the truth, too late for it to matter. That was peace. And it cost everything. He never said her name out loud anymore. Not to strangers. Not to himself. But he wrote it, once, where no one else would see. Inside the cover of a blank notebook. A single word, centered on the page, Lena. That was it. No dates. No explanation. Just presence. Some names are too heavy to carry on the tongue. But written, they remain. She wasn't a case. She wasn't evidence. She wasn't proof. She was a girl who loved chalk drawings and watermelon slices, and folding her socks the wrong way. He wrote her name, closed the book, and slid it under his mattress. Not to hide it. To protect it. From the world. From others. From himself. She had already been taken once. He wouldn't let the memory of her be taken again. There were dozens of them. Stacked in a shoebox at the back of the closet. Letters he wrote, but never mailed. Some just one sentence, others pages long, each one addressed to her. I bought mangoes today. You used to hate them. I had a dream you were learning to braid my hair. I saw your face again, not in the footage, in a girl on the train. They weren't messages. They were echoes, shards of a father that never got to be one. He read one now, silently. The paper smelled of old wood and dust. He folded it carefully, returned it to the stack. He didn't need to send them. He just needed to know they existed. That somewhere in this world, her name had been spoken again, even if it was just by him. He boarded the train like anyone else. No drama. No flashback. Just a seat. Just silence. Across from him, a young girl rested her head on her mother's shoulder. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her feet turned slightly inward. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. She looked nothing like Lena. Not really. Different hair. Different skin. But the posture. That soft, defenseless lean. It struck something deep. He didn't stare. Didn't speak. He just looked once. Long enough to remember. Long enough to ache. Then he turned away, rested his head against the window, and closed his eyes. Because the world didn't owe him answers. It had already given him one. And it had nearly killed him. There was a frame on his shelf. Once it held her photo. But one day, he took the picture out. Not because he forgot her. Because he couldn't bear to see that moment frozen anymore. The smile, the gap tooth, the tilted head, it became too much. Now, the frame is empty. But he never removed it. It still sits there, between two unread books, collecting dust. Visitors never ask about it. And he never explains. But he looks at it every morning. Not to remember what she looked like, but to remind himself she lived. That the space she occupied was real. That her absence has weight. Sometimes the most honest tribute is the one with nothing left inside. He spoke it once. Just once. Late at night. What? To no one. To her. Maybe to himself. It was a confession. A surrender. A sentence he'd carried for 6 years but never dared release. He whispered, "I didn't lose you. I gave you away." Then silence. No wind. No creaking floorboard. No catharsis. Just the words, hanging like smoke in a room that would never forget them. There was no redemption in saying it. No release. But it was the truth. And he had finally said it. The girl in the footage had stopped being a mystery. She had become what she always was, a daughter waiting to be remembered. And now, finally, he remembered her fully. Not with guilt. Not with hope. But with truth.